Just how strong is end of series Yuji? Let's talk about it, but spoilers beware. Alright, so to begin, let's just quickly go over what Yuji's got in his bag. And first and foremost, this man's body is built different. He is basically akin to heavenly restricted users. I'm talking fully awakened Maki and Toji. We don't know that he is exactly to par, but that's the level I would put him on. In both his durability, I mean, let's just talk about it, and also his strength. This man was throwing cars back in like the first season, right? Maybe it was the second season. Either way, Yuji is built different when it comes to his physical stats. Next, long before the Tiger of the West had sniffed a curse technique, he was already the man chosen by the Black Sparks. I'm talking mere minutes after he learned what this even was, he tied the consecutive Black Flash record, and we know for a fact that he will go on to surpass Gojo's total Black Flash count. He is built different. This maneuver that literally sets great sorcerers apart from good ones, he had on lock from the jump. Next, Yuji has a defense against domain expansions in the form of Simple Domain, which he learned from the GOAT of Simple Domain himself, Kusakabe. And speaking of things Yuji learned from his swap training, he also knows reverse curse technique thanks to his time with Yuta, who is literally the prodigy of reverse curse technique. And that leads us to Yuji's first curse technique, blood manipulation, which he got thanks to consuming his curse womb death painting brothers. Not only is this a very potent curse technique in and of itself, which he has not mastered yet, but he will, but on top of that, it makes RCT even easier for him because he is able to create blood due to the nature of his curse technique just in general. So that's basically a cheat code to make RCT that much more potent and efficient for him. And then, oh yeah, Yuji has a whole other curse technique on top of that, and arguably one of the best in the entire series in Shrine. The one he was gifted thanks to Sukuna spending time in his body. He now has his very own version of Cleave and Dismantle, and presumably the Furnace as well. Now, whether or not we'll see that in the series remains to be seen, but he has it. And then last but certainly not least, Yuji has achieved the pinnacle of Jujutsu by being able to manifest a domain expansion. He is in truly rarefied air with this feat. So all that being said, where do we rank Yuji? Special grade. Easy, in my opinion, and he's only got room to grow. He only just unlocked Shrine and Domain Expansion, right? Give him some time to master those things, and he is going to be a true problem that really no one's going to be able to deal with. Disclaimer, asterisk on the side, he's still not Gojo or Sukuna level, okay? They are just completely in the outer realms, but everyone else considered, Yuji is right there with them. And all of that leads me to this question I got from Parmesan, who says, who do you think the strongest character fully awakened Yuji beats by himself? So he's not going to beat Gojo. He's not going to beat Sukuna. I don't think he can take Yuta or Kenjaku yet, just because the domain difference, I think his is less refined than theirs would be, and so he wouldn't be able to win the domain clash. Plus, Rika is just an issue. So I'd say those four are still firmly above him for now, but I think, and this is going to make a lot of people mad, I can already see, but I think Yuji beats Kashimo, and I think that is the strongest person he could take in a one-on-one right now. But I would love to hear y'all's thoughts down below. And y'all, we're going to keep this video rolling with some more questions I've gotten, so I want to give another spoiler warning, even though I already gave one, just in case anyone stuck around because they were curious about Yuji. There's going to be some manga spoilers in these. But starting with this one from Music, who said, how do you imagine Kenjaku could have thrived in his first life? On paper, his technique is kind of trash if he can't take down someone stronger than him or conveniently find a powerful corpse. He'd also need someone to transplant his brain, right? And this is a good question because, yeah, from what we know about the body swap, it doesn't seem to be inherently powerful on its own. You kind of need to find a body with a good technique, and then he just keeps building his arsenal, right? So I think the thing about Kenjaku is that we know he's a genius, we know he's a man of meticulous plans, and we know he's patient, right? So I think it easily could just be that he waited for his moment and struck when he needed to, right? Because he didn't even need to be able to find a powerful curse technique in his first lifespan, right? Considering he can swap bodies, he could have just swapped into any random Joe over and over and lived for hundreds and hundreds of years until the perfect scenario where he could get a powerful technique, be it Noritoshi Kamo or whoever, right? I'm so very curious about Kenjaku's history, but I think it's just a matter of using his intellect and waiting until the pieces were right for him to jump. So I think it could have just been patience, if nothing else. But also, we don't really know the nuance and depth of the body swap technique itself, right? Like, what would the domain expansion of Kenjaku's initial body swap technique be? If he was, proficient and skilled enough to have a domain, maybe he could still just, take out some people with powerful techniques if they didn't. So I think he had ways, but again, I think it could just be waiting for that perfect moment, regardless of how long it took. And then for the transplant, I would think so, but again, we still don't really know the nuance of how this works. But from what we do know, I would assume that he had needed somebody to help him pull that off. But it's at least possible that he didn't, because again, we still just don't know enough about how this technique works. Next up, speaking of Kinjaku, we got this from Tiberius, who says, hypothetical Yuta versus Kinjaku. As we know, Kinney has an open domain, Yuta doesn't, but let's assume Yuta's can last for 3 minutes in the domain clash. Would it be possible for Yuta to swap his domain's coordinates during that clash? And if he could, when he moves it, would Kinjaku's domain move with it, right? And this is such a good question, something I never thought about, because if you could do that, then that was a potential win con for Gojo in his fight with Sukuna, right? If Gojo just teleported his domain out of Sukuna's open domain, then he would have just had him dead to rights, assuming the domain didn't move with it. So yeah, either this is just some possibility that Gege didn't consider, or there are nuances and rules to being able to shift your domain, because we don't know how that actually functions. And it's at least possible that if your domain is literally being bombarded, aka by another open domain, Kinjaku's in the Yuta situation or Sukuna's in the Gojo situation, perhaps then you just can't move it. Like maybe that's just one of the rules based on binding vows or whatever, that like as long as the domain is not being interfered with, then you can move it, right? If it's getting attacked, then maybe you can't. But assuming you could move it, it at least stands to reason to me that the open domain surrounding it wouldn't just also teleport with it. So I think that would be a pretty nice win con, assuming it was possible. So I don't have a concrete answer for you here, but this was a really fascinating question. Next up, we got a longer one from Autistic Tomato here, so y'all can pause to read it if you'd like, but they first want to know my thoughts on possibly seeing Megumi's innate domain, perhaps via a conversation with Tengen, and I think that would be fascinating if we got to see it. Like you mentioned, we probably won't see Megumi do a complete domain. Maybe I shouldn't say probably. There's 3 chapters left, but that doesn't seem likely that we're just going to see Megumi cast a domain expansion, right? So I would love this if so. It would be interesting to get a little bit of insight on whatever's happening with Tengen, so I'd be here for it if so. And then you also ask, before we begin the journey of these last 3 chapters, you'd like to know one or a few topics that I'd personally like to be touched on. And yeah, I have mentioned before that when the series is over, I will make a video talking about things that I really wish we had gotten to see. But a couple things that I would love to see before the final 3 chapters, like you, would be the consequences of breaking a binding vow. That's been one of the more intriguing ideas for me ever since that concept was first introduced back when Kinjaku and Mahito were speaking with Mekamaru. But in addition to that, I would love any insight onto the history between Kinjaku, Sukuna, and Tengen back in the Heian era. And, again, is that something we're going to get at this point? I don't know, but I would say those are my main 2 things that I would like to see. And then next up here, we've got a few points from Simple, and y'all pause to check out the whole thing, but let's go through these. The first one says that he predicts Yuji will keep Sukuna inside of him, which is also my leaning right now, but says that he could go around hunting the Culling Game Sorcerers, the incarnated sorcerers, and due to his unique ability with these soul strikes, perhaps be able to free them the same way he did Megumi. And yeah, with 3 chapters left, I don't really think we'll see that, but that would be a really cool mission for Yuji to go on at this point. Then next he says, I have a feeling that to end the Culling Games, the barriers will fall due to Tengen's absence. It's definitely possible, right? I do think they won't just innately fall, but I think they could if not maintained. So I don't think Tengen is necessarily essential at this point because the barriers have already been created and have been there for a while. But I do think they will need upkeep, if that makes sense. So I think it's at least possible for them to prevent this. Next, since Jacob's Ladder stops techniques, could it stop Mythical Beast Amber from killing Kashimo, Yuki's Black Hole, or even bypass Gojo's Infinity? And this is a really interesting interaction to think about. I think it has the potential to, but it wouldn't just off rip, like cancel those. I think it would be a back and forth based on power. The same way that Gojo and Domain Amp kind of went back and forth when Jogo and Hanami were using it against him, but Gojo was able to amp up his Infinity and overpower it. I think it would probably be something like that with Jacob's Ladder when it comes into contact with an active technique like this. And then finally, what makes the Kamo clan even in power? Where Simple basically compares blood manipulation to Limitless and the Ten Shadows, and I completely agree that it doesn't stack up in relation to those two. So I would say that while blood manipulation is good, especially in the hands of somebody that does know RCT, that it's not going to hold a candle to those techniques. So I think most likely they're one of the big three clans because of their political power or just, their status in general back when things were first starting, right? And then, as curse techniques and, actual power consolidated, maybe they couldn't really keep up. But I think it's probably just a mix of political and blood manipulation being good compared to like whatever any other smaller non-big three clans were capable of. And then finally for this video, we got this one from Yassine who asks, Heian era Sukuna and Gojo versus Gojo Kuna, aka Sukuna but in Gojo's body. And honestly, while that would be a demon, I gotta give it to the tag team duo here because it's still just two of the strongest ever versus one. So even if we give Sukuna the Limitless and the Six Eyes, I'm pretty sure Gojo and true form Sukuna would figure out a way to get the job done. However, devil's advocate, there is the whole idea that, Gojo is held back by having allies. So would Gojo and Sukuna be capable of the requisite teamwork in order to take down Gojo Kuna? Maybe not. And like, what even would that teamwork look like? I don't know. But I do think ultimately they would be able to get it done. That's it for this one, y'all. Special shout out to everyone who sent in a question. Thank you guys so much for the support. And if you happen to be watching this the day I put it out, we got chapter 269 leaks tonight. So be sure to join the Discord and come join us for whatever chaos that is going to bring. As always, y'all, thank you so much for watching.